Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for Halatali Hard. This is one of 3 new dungeons made available as of patch 2.2 in Final Fantasy XIV, Into the Maelstrom. A lot of people may have skipped the normal version of this encounter as they leveled up, which is a shame because it was home to a number of really cool mechanics. If you did miss out on the normal version, you're in for a treat with this hard mode. My name is Ms. Tech, and I'll be your dungeon guide. Most of the trash pools consist of about 2 to 3 mobs. Dodge any AoEs and remember to keep an eye out for any patrols. You may also notice a number of ceiling traps that will slam down and damage anything underneath them. They also place a vulnerability debuff on anything they hit, including enemy mobs, so you may use that to your advantage if you so choose. The first boss is Parkman, and he might give you flashbacks of Arum Vale. Tanks should position him away from the group as he has a pretty wide cleave. He will periodically cast Electrocution, a mid-range blast to anyone not standing in melee or max range, and Piercing Glower, which towers a random player. There is no telegraph for Piercing Glower, but if you notice him turn towards you and glare at you, it's time to get out of his line of sight. You need to avoid these as much as possible, and it's best for the ranged and healers to spread out. Once you engage, you'll notice a single mammoth wandering around the room tethered to a lever on the back wall. Assign one person to keep an eye on this lever. The boss will eventually cast the people's favorite 1000-ton swing, which cannot be interrupted and will hit the entire room. To avoid the massive damage from this, you'll use the mammoth and the lever it's attached to. Once the boss begins his cast, which is pretty obvious by the way as the entire room turns blue, a party member needs to flip that switch. This will cause the mammoth to stop in place and start casting a point-blank aura that will place a mana wall buff on anyone standing in it. Let's repeat that quickly. The boss will cast his ultimate. Any players not assigned to lever duty should make their way over to the mammoth. The lever will be pulled, the mammoth will cast his buff, and everyone should be grouped in his range to gain the mana wall. With this mana wall buff, you'll be able to shield yourself from most of the swing damage. Rinse, repeat, and the boss will eventually die of frustration when he isn't able to hurt you. Each wing and respective boss fights in Halatali Hard are completely separate, so after you destroy a boss, be on the lookout for any NPCs that will transport you to the next wing. This room seems a little familiar. Although Firemain is nowhere to be seen, you'll be attacked by 1 and then 2 bears out of the hallways surrounding the room. Allow your tank to pick these up before nuking them down. Tanks should also be mindful of the wandering Pisty here. The next boss is Catoblepus. The first thing you'll notice is the 4 pedestals around the room. When the boss is pulled, these pedestals will activate with clickable shadowy orbs. Apparently, Halatali is all about clicking things. It's best for the group to position themselves somewhere around these pedestals in preparation for the main mechanic. Pedestals cannot be shared, so tanks and melee should know which is theirs. There are a number of things going on in this fight which can easily get confusing, so let's break it down. The first thing you'll notice is the emote spam describing the color of the boss's eye, which also coincides with the color of the rings around the room. As far as I can tell, the color of the eye will determine what abilities the boss will use at that time. We start off in blue phase, where his main ability will be Cold Stare, a massive conal AoE. This ability can be difficult to dodge if you're standing at range, so do your best to avoid it. If you do get hit by this, you'll be debuffed, so healers keep an eye out for any dispels. You'll also see a ground AoE in this phase that will continue on throughout the fight regardless of eye color. Be sure to avoid it before it blows up. When the eye turns yellow, the boss begins to cast Demonic Eye, a long cast that will turn all players into stone. This is where the shadowy orbs on the pedestals come into play. As soon as the eye turns yellow and he begins to cast, all players should click on their respective orbs, granting you immunity to the spell. If you fail to hit your pedestal in time and get hit by his blast, you'll be turned to stone for a few seconds. After yellow, the boss's eye will turn red. In this phase, he will continuously pulse Bestial Roar, an AoE blast that needs to be healed through. At the same time, his tainted eye will become targetable and should be destroyed. Everyone should switch to his eye as soon as possible. When the eye is down, the boss will be pushed back into blue phase and will repeat until the end. The only thing you need to worry about is the increased difficulty of the ground AoEs, but again, avoid those as much as possible. Rinse and repeat until the boss is killed, and then teleport to the next and final wing. The trash in this section is a teaser to the final boss encounter. You'll notice we're fighting against mobs that have similar abilities to playable classes. It's like PvP against AI. The trash is simple enough, and remember you can always use CC if you're feeling overwhelmed. A good rule of thumb here is to destroy the healer first. The last boss is more of an encounter than a specific boss. We begin the first phase against 4 combatants, a tank, a healer, an archer, and a lancer. The lancer doesn't seem to follow basic enmity rules, but he does very little damage and can be ignored or kited until it's time to kill it. Be sure to avoid his AoE as well. Your first target should be the healer to avoid wasting your damage. Then you can focus the 2 DPS and then the tank. To be perfectly honest, I have no idea what causes this massive puddle, and I didn't care to stand in it to find out what it did. But generally, if you see unknown poo on the ground, it's important not to stand in it. Once this first group is killed, Mumu Eppo the Beholder and his friend Clifford the Big Red Demon will spawn. The Red Demon should be tanked while Mumu Eppo will wander around and randomly cast. The main mechanic here is cast by Mumu Eppo, so we focus him down first. He will target 2 to 3 players and chain them together while starting a massive ground AoE cast. It's up to any unchained players to rescue the others by finding Thal's Scepter, which is chaining everyone together. Clicking on it will free the affected players, allowing them to run out of the ground AoE. This repeats until Mumu Eppo is down. The Red Demon is very simple in comparison. Melee need to be careful as they can trigger a tail swipe when standing directly behind him. He will cast ground AoEs and frontal cones and may charge players for a bit of damage. Avoid and heal through these as necessary. And there you have it, clicking things hard mode. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. As always, thanks for watching. Up next, we'll look at the Lost City of Amtapor. Till next time!